Hi, Roy here, Yard of Random Books, and just a little thing occurred to me might be interesting. Now that the whole world has been so dramatically Tolkienized, let's look and try and think our way back to what it'd be like to be back in 1965, part of the first mass market audience for Tolkien that there was, when paperbacks started coming out. So 1965 in America, Ace Books published The Lord of the Rings. Controversially, it turned out they thought some loophole meant that they had basically entered the public domain in the States. Turned out they hadn't really. And there's a whole thing known as the War of the Rings, Tolkien wasn't happy, etc., etc. I'm not going to retell that story, but I thought let's look at these books as objects and see what they're telling us as a reader who might picked one up in the mid 60s, and how do they present the story to people. There isn't really a fantasy genre to just peg it into. People won't have automatically heard of Tolkien, so how does it work? Well, one thing in the Fellowship of the Ring is you're getting a very brightly coloured cover. It's bright red. There are these kind of floral devices on the spine, and a cover painting by Jack Gocken. Simple brush strokes, quite dramatic in its way in terms of the shapes, but it could almost be a science fiction cover maybe. And in fact, it's published by Ace and it's branded as a science fiction classic. So just park the word science fiction for a moment, as I think it's interesting, how they're describing it and marketing it. What is it? So they're telling us Tolkien is winner of the International Fantasy Award, so he's got some credibility. And you get a quote from Anthony Boucher: "Superb, one of the major achievements of epic imagination in our lifetimes, and your life is the poorer if you have failed to read it." So endorsement there. You get more endorsements on the back. Richard Hughes wrote of this book that for width of imagination it almost beggars parallel. Blah blah blah. C.S. Lewis, the celebrated writer, said, "Here are beauties which pierce like swords or burn like cold iron. Here is a book that will break your heart, good beyond hope." So, okay, dialing up the endorsements there. But the blurb itself, I think, is an interesting one. "For many years, the magnificent novel of Middle-earth, the world of the Fellowship of the Ring, has been the most cherished preserve of a devoted band of readers who number in their ranks most of the major science fiction writers." So previously it's been this obscure, almost semi-secret thing, but high status people like it, major science fiction writers. "For in the work of J.R.R. Tolkien they acknowledge the master fantasy imagination of our century." Okay, so it's fantasy. "Now for the first time this book has been made available to the general science fiction and fantasy public in a low-priced edition." I've got to tell you, it wasn't a low-priced edition to me, mate. But at the time it was 75 cents. "The story of Middle-earth and its lands and kingdoms, the story of Frodo and his danger-laden mission to return the Ring of Power to the land of the enemy that made it, is such a tale as cannot be duplicated for wonder and vivid out-of-this-world adventure." So we've had science fiction, fantasy, adventure. And inside you get another blurb from DAW. So that would be Donald A. Wollheim, obviously needing no introduction, the science fiction publisher within Ace. It brought in science fiction to Ace. Here is a world of wonder. Here's a world of fantasy adventure comparable to the finest such visions in all of literature. Tolkien's saga without peer. At the same time, here is a book of sword and sorcery. So there's another big term. So we've had science fiction, fantasy, it's a saga, and it's sword and sorcery. People had endlessly debated, is it sword and sorcery? In 1965 it was. That anyone can read with delight and pleasure, let alone the masters of the field, these major science fiction writers who are the ones, they're trying quite hard, they're piling on these quotes from people telling you how good it is, reassuring you that these major people have read it. Fraught with suspense, excitement, and adventure. The quest of Frodo the Hobbit and his Fellowship of the Ring is the very essence of that sense of wonder that underlies the whole premise of science fiction and fantasy reading. And you get another Jack Gocken, perhaps a more successful piece of art, a black and white drawing of one of the hobbits among the trees. Okay, so that was the first one, Red. Obviously that then followed up by Lord of the Rings 2, The Two Towers. Again with the supporting quotes, it's an extraordinary work. Oh yes, great painting. I think Jack Gocken still, Nazgul flying through the air with an unfeasibly large sword. Pure excitement, unencumbered narrative, moral warmth, barefaced rejoicing in beauty, but excitement most of all. Say, the New York Times. On the back, the Boston Herald Traveller, one of the best wonder tales ever written, and the Chicago Tribune, a wonderful story set in a world which paralyzes the imagination, told in magnificent prose. So we've still got all of that, still got the little flower logos, and it's Fellowship of the Ring, that wonderfully varied band of courageous adventurers, continues its marvel-laden expedition. In this, the second great volume of their epic fantasy. To carry the rings of power into the very doors of doom was their aim, but the perils and magical lands that had first to be mastered have made J.R.R. Tolkien's work the foremost sword and sorcery saga of this century. And then inside, you pretty much go straight into it. Another illustration, and end, I would imagine. Then final copy was Blue. Probably the best of the paintings. Sauron. I can't do the kind of exhibition pronunciation that they do on Rings of Power, which I think is Welsh actually. But anyway, Sauron, there he is, Sauron, towering above people. You know, but it's very science fiction looking to me. This could be, if it was set on Mars, maybe it could look like that too. Another quote, it's the New York Herald Tribune. It's impressive achievement, unique among the imaginative works of our time. Unforgettable series of fantasy adventures is completed in this magnificently climactic volume. And then you get a big quote from The Spectator. Ends up by saying, it is a unique work, like the hobbits themselves, a new genus. It's hard to believe that it will not eventually find a place in literature. Well, Spectator, you need not have worried. It has. And I'll assemble the pictures together because there's a nice little detail of some elvish writing that runs across the whole band of them, the whole set of the books. So yeah, that's what the Ace books were like. Persuading you, lots of endorsements. It's fantasy, it's kind of connected to science fiction, it's also sword and sorcery, and it's epic adventure. And I guess it is all of those things, so everyone's a winner. Apart from Ace Books, who were banned from publishing them and had to pay Tolkien a load of royalties. Okay, thank you very much. Got that off my chest. Always nice to see people here. Be great to hear comments. And I will see you next time.